It is that time now once again for getting lumped up with my friends. It's RockerMike and Rob that you should know, and you'll find them here on the Rock Show. Ooh, yeah, on the Rock Show.
Hello, people. We are live on Facebook, and this is a very special show. It's a show remembering two very special people, a former New York Doll and a guy that was a great producer that just started killing people.
Yeah, we're talking about Sylvain Sylvain and the legendary Phil Spector. Yeah, I mean, it's a sad day, sad couple of days with the two of them. 2021 is turning out to be just as shitty as 2020 so far, right?
Yeah, but it was worse when David Bowie died that year.
Oh yeah, we lost Lemmy, Bowie back to back. That was crazy. That was crazy. But
that was brutal.
Sylvain Sylvain was the guitarist to the New York Dolls. Sadly he passed away from cancer a few days ago. Big loss to the New York rock scene. He was around for almost 50 years. A nice guy. Yeah. I met him a couple of times over the years, had a couple conversations with him, was always friendly. Didn't seem suck up like that.
I ran into him too a few times.
Oh yeah, he was around. And he was a character.
Yeah.
He was always
like East Village.
Yeah, he was a character. He was a funny guy. And I used to hang out a lot with the Waldos. Sadly, we lost Walter Law over the summer. But I used to hang out with the Waldos a little bit way back, like 25, 30 years ago. And he would sometimes just pop up, on stage and be at shows and things like that with them. So it was always cool. But he had cancer. I thought he was going to beat it. I was hearing it for the last year or two that he was sick, but seemed like he was going to beat it. And sadly, he didn't. Give a little history of the guy, because he has an interesting upbringing. He was born in Cairo, in Egypt. Okay. And
I always find that amazing.
Yeah, Valentine's Day, 1951 was his birthday. And he was of Jewish descent, which at that time in Egypt was a problem because they were having that Suez Canal crisis and there was other issues going on, a lot of political upheaval. So his family hightailed it out of Egypt. They went to France. And from there, he was there for a while. And then from there, he ended up in New York. He ended up in Buffalo. And then from there, he ended up in Queens. And so he had an interesting upbringing. He could when he got to America, he could speak every 3 languages, but none of them were English. So,
but he went to the right place, Queens.
What's that, Rob?
He went to the right place, Queens.
Yeah, well, he went to Queens, and he was interested in rock and roll right away as a kid. And in Europe, growing up in those early years, he had an interesting, tie to it. He would say even in France, that they knew about rock and roll. So he had like a little bit of a different perspective coming from Europe. When he got to Queens, he made friends with a lot of people. He connected with eventually Billy Murcia, who was the original New York Dolls drummer. He connected with Johnny Thunders. They were in a band together around, I want to say, 1969 or so, called the Pox. And they played around a little bit. But what Sylvain was into in the beginning was fashion. He had like a clothing line. Okay.
Yep.
Basically, it was like fancy sweaters and stuff like that. It was a company called Truth and Soul, and there's no doubt that his fashion sense had a lot to do with the New York Dolls and the way they looked eventually. Okay. Also, he, was friends with Thunders before the Dolls and used to give him all kinds of British clothes, stuff that you couldn't get here.
Yes.
So Johnny had a whole look kind of based on some of the stuff that Sylvain was involved with. And there's a big story. I'm going to get into it one day, but just not today. But he did replace Rick Rivets on guitar in the Dolls. Okay, originally the Dolls was not the New York Dolls; it was the Dolls, and it was Rick Rivets, Arthur Kane, the bass player, Johnny Thunders, and Billy Murcia. There would be some changes, and Sylvain would replace Rick Rivets, and you'd get the lineup that everybody knew. Billy Murcia would eventually pass away, and they'd get Jerry Nolan. But Sylvain cemented himself in the band, and he was in a lot of ways the soul of the band. Okay, I wasn't old enough to see them in their heyday. I did see them when they came back in the early 2000s. They reformed in around 2004, and I did get to see them 2 times. Amazing. It was great. It wasn't the full band. Obviously, a couple of guys had passed away by then. It was really just Sylvain, Arthur, and David Johansen. But Arthur would only do like one show, and then he would pass away. So really, when I got to see them, it was just Sylvain and David Johansen. But still, they were great. And they ended up putting out 3 albums around that time. The original 2 albums from the 70s, New York Dolls, and then Into Much Too Soon. That was the second album, came out in 74. In the 70s, after the band broke up, he had a bit of a solo career. He recorded with a band called The Criminals. He recorded in the 90s an album called Sleep Baby Doll. Did some great, he had some great lineups that he would play with. He played with Glenn Matlock, who we interviewed not too long ago.
He did. I saw that.
Yeah, back in 2013, 2014, they were called the Sex Dolls, mix of the Sex Pistols and the New York Dolls. 2018, it's interesting. He went to Tokyo with Sammy Yaffa, who was originally in Hanoi Rocks and did play in the reformed New York Dolls as well. They did a couple of dates in Tokyo as just the Dolls, which I thought was fascinating. I was good friends with Rick Rivets, and we were talking about Sylvain going to Japan at that time. And I said, isn't it ironic that he's using the name the Dolls now? When he took his spot in the band, he took it from the Dolls to the New York Dolls, but then now he's going out as the Dolls. It was cool. They had no bone to pick with each other or anything like that.
No matter, we're gonna do a show. We're gonna shit on there because there's some controversy. There's a lot of bullshit and dirty fucking underhand shit that go in the rock business.
There's gonna be a right time and place, but now's not the time. The New York Dolls. I mean, you growing up in the Village and everything, Rob. I mean, you know how influential they are even now, 45 years later.
Huge. Even now, they're influential now.
Yeah, I mean, they are. They're still on every jukebox. Okay, and so many bands. I mean, bands that we saw in our 20s, bands like D-Generation and stuff like that. They were all influenced by the Dolls. Kiss was influenced by the Dolls. Okay.
Oh, very much. Yeah.
The Hanoi Rocks, the whole hair metal scene in the 80s, whether they want to admit it or not. The only band that I recall actually
Guns N' Roses. Guns N' Roses almost stole the image.
Yeah, and Motley Crue. Motley Crue too, a little bit.
Definitely Motley Crue.
Yeah, I mean, Nikki Sixx has always said he wanted to be Johnny Thunders. In fact, I think he probably started doing heroin because of Johnny Thunders. But not exactly a good reason. But I guess if you're going to do it, why not? But You can't deny the influence of the New York Dolls on the whole rock and roll scene. They're one of those bands that I'll always say we point to as influential, that nothing was the same after. They didn't sell a whole lot of records, but they, everybody that listened to them started a band and just carried that influence along. They were sloppy. They were strange. They were funny. They were ahead of their time in a lot of ways. They were of their time in a lot of ways too, because they represented a time in New York that doesn't exist anymore. Okay, where you could be the freakiest thing and still be popular, and they had a cult following, a rabid following in the city. Even when they went out to LA, when they played the Whiskey, I think it was around 72, 73, they blew everybody's minds over there. I'll tell you a funny story. I went to San Francisco, okay, about 1990, and I spent the summer out there. And that was the height of my Johnny Thunders days, okay? And I went down to Haight-Ashbury in a pair of black skin-tight jeans, okay, a New York Dolls shirt, my hair, a New York Dolls shirt. My hair was blue-black, Revlon blue-black, down to here, okay. I had a lot of hair back then, and big platform Converse shoes, okay. And walking down Haight-Ashbury, people thought I was like in Motley Crue or something. I'm like, no, but thank you, but it's just that whole look, that whole glam look, they invented that. Okay. It was going on in England. There was a glam scene in England, but if you looked at Thunders and Sylvain, his look, he would put on the makeup big time, and he had a great sense of fashion, his hats that he would wear. And I liked the guy. I never heard a bad thing about him. He was always just a nice guy. And it's too bad he's gone. So
you know what? The guy was the influence, the guy for a guy that came from Egypt and moved to America and became a rock star, even though he died at the age of 69, and his birthday's next month.
I gotta point out a weird little thing that I noticed is he died the same day, but I think about 28 years later that Jerry Nolan died, the drummer from the Dolls.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah, but he died on the same day, but about 28 years later. Also, he died right before his 70th birthday, and Rick Rivets passed away right before his 70th birthday too. So thought that was kind of an ironic thing. What are you gonna do, man? David Johansen.
Mike, do you know he was? Do you know? Yeah, do you know he was living in Nashville? I thought that was weird that he was living in Nashville. I didn't realize that.
Yeah. I think he moved down there. A lot of guys have relocated down to that area, either Memphis or Nashville. I know, like Cheetah Chrome moved down there too from Dead Boys. I think I think it's a fairly cheap place to live, considering New York, but
no, but you know what it is? A lot of people move down there because they still play music and they get to play with other people, or they're collaborating, or they just help out and play something in the background. They're getting paid to do this work.
Right. Well, I didn't mean just because it was a cheap place to live. I meant that there's also, Nashville is known for, there's a million places to play. So they could probably get a lot of gigs down there in small clubs and things like that. Yeah, it makes sense. He was, and also he was a blues guy. A lot of people don't really realize that. He was very into blues music, and going down south, I'm sure he had a lot going on with that too. But like I said, David Johansen's the only one standing now. It's kind of sad. He's the only one left. He was in
Yeah, the
interviewed
last of
by
the
Rolling
Mohican. Let me
Stone.
ask you a question.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, what song did he? Because they say they got him listed as a songwriter, and he also played the piano. I didn't even realize he played the piano.
Yeah, he could play the piano. I don't know. He never did it on stage. I don't recall that. But in the studio, I think he was pretty, pretty well talented, that he could do other things than just play guitar.
Wow.
In my recollection, and if I'm wrong, somebody pointed out to me, I don't recall the Dolls really splitting up their writing. In other
Yeah.
words, like, I don't think they said this is by Sylvain and this is by Thunders and something like that. I don't recall that. I could look on the records and see, but I don't recall that. I think they made it a group effort. So
Okay.
Yeah. But big loss, big loss. He wrote a good
Huge
book.
loss.
He wrote a good book that came out a couple of years ago. It's called "There's No Bones in Ice Cream."
That's a great title.
And it's a story about his life, and it's a good read. You don't have to even be a fan of the band. It's a really cool read. He just tells it like it was, and it's an interesting story. He talks about his childhood in Europe and leaving Egypt and all that, and it's just it's a good read. He was an interesting guy. Rest in peace.
I'm fascinated by the Egypt because I didn't even realize he was from Egypt. But I thought
And he was a Jew.
the guy was
So it was a
and
different
Jewish.
and Jewish on top of it. Yeah.
That's like weird to me. Jewish and from Egypt. My God.
Well, because they threw them all out eventually. There used to be Jews there.
Wow.
In the Middle East.
I never realized it's crazy, man.
Yeah. But it's he lived the American dream. He came here and he became a rock star. Who wouldn't want that?
And he was a rock star. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Mike, so now we're gonna talk about Phil Spector. He's been on the show hundreds and hundreds of times. We talk about the gunslinger, the lunatic.
How many times have we mentioned Phil
Probably
and
like-
his antics? And we've had people on. Lala Brooks came on last month and was telling some stories. And we've done shows on the Ronettes. We've talked about Phil producing George Harrison. The guy is a legend. And, it didn't take long. I think I when I heard that he died, I think you sent it to me, but I was actually just reading it at the same time that you texted me. And literally within minutes of getting off the phone with you, the social media shit started and people started shitting on him. And,
oh yeah,
I get it. He did kill somebody. I get it. Okay. And he, he ripped people off in the business and he wasn't always a good guy, but even Ronnie Spector made comments yesterday, I think on her Twitter and her Instagram, and she just said musical genius but a lousy husband.
Oh, I read something. I saw something.
Yeah, and it's true. And you know what? But for the sake of this podcast and the future, because we're going to do a show on him soon, maybe in the spring. I can separate it. I can separate it with the guy. All right. I'm not condoning what he did. I'm not forgiving what he did. He was a tragic figure. We dealt with something like this when we talked about Gary Glitter. All right. Gary Glitter was a pedophile and a rapist. Okay. And he's in jail right now, but he made some great music. And Phil Spector died in jail. He got, he killed Lana Clarkson in 2003. For those who don't recall, she was a B-movie actress. They were on a date and they went back to his place. And, he says that she shot herself because she was upset about her life and things. And there was a gun there. He always had guns around. That was going
Oh
back for
yeah.
many years. And he says she just put the gun and killed herself. Put the gun to her head and killed herself. Meanwhile, the forensics showed the gunpowder all over him, which is what happens when you shoot somebody. Okay,
Yeah.
the gun flash gets on you, get gunpowder on you. That's how they know you did it. Okay, and he didn't help himself because I think I forget, because I know he was tried twice. The first case ended up in a mistrial, but I think in both times, I think he represented himself, or he did at least once, which is crazy. All right, and you know, he didn't help himself wearing those crazy wigs and, you know, not making sense and all that stuff. You know, it's interesting because when he went to jail, he actually started to get treated for bipolar. So he obviously had issues, okay, his whole life, I would think. But in the studio, he was a genius, and that's what we're going to talk about here for a few minutes. His real name was Harvey Phillip Spector, and he was born December
Yep.
26, 1939, up in the Bronx. He, you know, he was very into music at an early age. He started in a band called the Teddy Bears, and they had that song "To Know Him Is to Love Him" in 1958. I guess he was about 19 in 1958.
Yeah.
You know, that was a hit, but that didn't go far, and he realized he wanted to be a producer. And you know, by the time he was 25, he was a millionaire. All right, because he had started. He was the young. He was one of the youngest. I think he was the youngest record label executive. Okay.
Yeah.
He started a company called Philles label. Okay. With Lester
Yeah.
Sills. Okay, so it was Phil and Lester. Philles.
Yeah. Phillips Records.
Right. He started that and started producing people. The Crystals were an early band that he produced. We had Lala Brooks on last month. She talked about all that. That was a great show. When
She was great.
you know, he discovered the Ronettes, okay, and when he found them, his life was changed because he fell in love with Ronnie, and you know,
Yeah.
he threw everything into that career. Now, you know, they ended up marrying, and if you want to read her book, Be My Baby, it's a great read. She tells everything, what it was like living with him, his craziness. He kept her prisoner and all that stuff. But you know, the music he made, okay, River Deep and Mountain High with Tina Turner, amazing song. All the Ronettes.
Yeah. He really liked her voice. Yeah. He loved her
Yeah, he
voice.
did. He was one of the first major people to really recognize her as a talent. Tina Turner was playing around for years, but really more on like an R&B circuit type of thing.
Yeah.
And he tried to bring her out into the mainstream. It should have been a bigger hit. I think it only charted like number 60 or 65 or something. It didn't go top 40, but it's a great song. He produced the Righteous Brothers. He produced Beatles' Let It Be, George Harrison, All Things Must Pass.
Great album. Great album.
John Lennon's Imagine. I mean, we all know the Instant Karma was produced, that song. The Plastic Ono Band, with John Lennon and the Plastic Ono Band. He produced Dion. He produced John Lennon's solo. Leonard Cohen. He produced the Ramones, End of the Century. Okay. You know, a very different Ramones album. There's a lot of mixed feelings even today about it. I happen to love it. Didn't always love it. I admit that. It was always, for a long time, it was one of my least favorite Ramones albums. but it grew on me over the years, and it's just something that
That was
I
a
listen.
great Ramones album. What are you talking about? That was
I know.
fantastic.
I gotta admit, in my early years as a Ramones fan, it was not my favorite Ramones album, but it became one of my favorites, and it holds up. It's still their best-selling album. Okay.
Yeah. Hey, Mike, let me
Uh,
ask you a question.
yeah.
Anybody that's a anybody that's a who's in music, pretty much went to Phil when they were a little struggling and they wanted to get a hit album and rejournal, like bring back the career, and he will help them. He was, I'll work with you, and I will people that separated for band. He was a guy that helped a lot of people in the music industry because he was a genius, but he knew how to produce a fucking album.
You know, he came at an interesting time because his heyday with all the girl groups and stuff and the singles was between like 60 and 63, right before the Beatles,
Yeah.
in between Elvis and the Beatles. And he kind of, you know, yeah, I mean, he fit in that notch very well. Okay. And those songs are timeless. You hear them in movies, you hear them in commercials,
Oh yeah.
but you hear them on the radio. I mean, the Phil Spector Christmas album, you hear like every song on that every Christmas. All right. It's, you know, one of the greatest
Fantastic
Christmas
album.
albums. Yeah. Yeah. You know, and what you said is true though. Like when the Ramones connected with Phil, originally he wanted to produce Rocket to Russia, which came out in '77. I think he approached them or had someone reach out, but they weren't interested in any outside producing at that point. But by '79, Rocket to Russia wasn't a huge hit. Road to Ruin in '78 wasn't a huge hit. Sire Records were like, why don't you try a big name producer? And Phil was thrown out there. The name was thrown out there, and they weren't sure. So when they were making the Rock and Roll High School movie in '79, they said, do one of the
Fucking
songs on
fantastic
here.
movie.
Yeah, it's great. Can you produce one song for the soundtrack? And he did I Want You Around. Okay. And yeah, great song. And you know, that was kind of like a test. And then I think Joey, in the original meeting, Joey spoke to him alone and said, you know, well, we want to get an outside producer because Sire Records wants us to have a hit. We think you could do it. You know, and Phil said, well, if you want a big name outside producer, get one. But if you want a Phil Spector record, then you could be with me. You know,
Yeah.
something like that. And that's what it was. Like you know, when Phil wasn't gonna Phil was gonna give you his style, and that's it. Now some people, you know, that wall of sound that he was
Yeah.
known for. Okay, I mean it's amazing because he did everything in excess. You know, if a song called for a bass player, he'd have 3. If a song called for a guitarist, he'd have 4. If a song called for a timpani player, he'd have 2. Okay, you know, those big drums. All right, everything was just big, and and it's amazing. You watch these. I've read about him. This book here called Wall of Pain. Okay, by Dave Thompson. Very good book about his life and career, and it ends like right around the time when he killed Lana Clarkson.
Wow.
It talks about how, you know, he would keep the needle in the red, and people didn't understand when as a producer how you could do that. But he had such an understanding in the studio how to capture a sound. He could hear things in a performance that nobody else could hear, and he might accent that, and people be like, "Wow, I never heard that." You know, just a chord change or something simple, he would notice and accent it, and that would make the song. And really, you know, I don't think there's been anybody like him. before or after. You know, I just got a lot of respect for him. I always liked the bands that he produced, and the music that
they were
you know,
great,
and
great.
in those early years, he was writing songs too. It wasn't just producing. Like those early songs for the Ronettes and the Crystals, he was involved in the songwriting too. So, I mean, he's a genius. I can't say anything else. Just a genius, a madman, but a fucking genius.
He was definitely a genius. You know what the thing was about him? Like even that album that he did with George Harrison, to me, that's one of the best albums George Harrison did. I love that fucking album.
Oh, it's not just the best album he did; it's the best album any Beatle did after the Beatles. I think.
Yeah,
I think it's the best Beatles solo album. And that album just turned.
Another thing, you know what? Oh yeah. And the thing is, anybody that works with him, you know what? It was a learning experience. The guy would take you and he would do stuff. He would make sound that you would never think people could do, but he was ahead of his time. The guy was a great producer, but a fucked up human being. It's like anybody else. You know, we all pull our pants one leg at a time. We fuck up.
The impression I get is that he had some kind of mental imbalance his whole life that just was never treated. I'm not making excuses. He did what he did, and he did his time. He would have been eligible for parole in 2024. He would have had it because he got 15 to life.
Yeah,
and he would have done his 15 years, but he didn't make it. COVID is what got him, from what I'm hearing.
Yeah, you know? That's what they're saying. I find that weird. You know, that's what took him out. You know.
Well, and he
because he was in jail.
It's in prison. You're mixed in with people. I don't think he was solitary or anything like that. You know, I think he was mixed in.
You know what I really think? I think he just went home, got lumped up, and shot her. It was like, fuck it, stop talking, stop writing in bed.
Yeah, it's crazy. Did you ever see the Al Pacino movie, the HBO movie?
You know what? I thought that movie because Al Pacino looked ridiculous.
It was terrible. It was terrible.
It was terrible.
Absolutely horrible. The only thing that made it worth it was watching him with the wigs on his head. That was.
It was a terrible movie.
Yeah.
Terrible fucking movie.
It talked about the murder and the trials and all that, and you got the sense a little bit about how crazy and paranoid he was. You know.
Oh yeah, he was definitely fucked up.
Yeah, I mean, he used to walk around with bodyguards all the time. I think after a while, I think he did that even into his old age. So I don't even know why. Nobody probably knew who he was anymore. You know, but it's sad. You know, he had you know, as much as he was a success and well respected, he was also known as a real difficult person. And then, you know, you would hear about the violence behind the scenes, you know, because back in the 60s, that stuff wasn't going to come out, you know, especially about celebrities. You know, there was no internet. There was no press like that. You know, it wasn't going to come out. I remember when I read Be My Baby, I think Ronnie Spector wrote that 30 years ago, easily. Okay. Even that was kind of shocking 30 years ago. I was like, wow, he was a real son of a bitch.
Wow.
You know, he'd lock her in the house. He wouldn't let her out. She had to just stay in the house. You know, she eventually ran out, you know, in her bare feet, I think, or half naked to get away from him. You know, and then she divorced him. You know.
He almost killed the Ramones. He almost killed one of the Ramones.
Yeah, I mean, he pulled guns on them, wouldn't let them leave. You know. Crazy.
Unreal.
I want to show another cool thing here. And again, this Wall of Pain is a really good bio on Phil. But I guess about 30 years ago now. It's 1991. This came out. Phil Spector, Back to Mono, 4 CD set. Okay, and it's actually It's 3 CDs of all the hit singles from 1958 through 1969. Three CDs that look like this, and then the 4th CD is the Christmas album. And back in '91,
that's a great album.
Yeah, back in '91, it was hard to find this, so it was kind of like a cool throw-in when this came out. And it came with a little back to mono button. Okay, back to mono. So I think you could still get this. It's got a cool book. If you can see it, it's like all the lyrics to the song.
I can see it.
You know, there's Lala. Can you see it?
Yeah, Lala Brooks. Yeah.
And you know, cool stuff.
I gotta tell you, Gino said that was a great interview we did with her. He thought that was an excellent interview we did with her.
Yeah, he told me too, and I was surprised that he was a fan. I was glad he was a fan. I just never expected it. But yeah, that was great. I hope we can have her on again one other time.
Yeah, she was fantastic. Great guest.
Yeah. So I think in the we're booked with rock shows till the end of April, but I think in May or June we'll do a full show on Phil. I think he deserves that much.
He deserves that much.
Yeah, and we'll talk about everything, and we're not going to sugarcoat it. He was a son of a bitch, and we'll talk about that too. Why not?
Yes, he was.
Yes, he was. So, what do we got?
All right, Mike. I think we have. I think this week we got the Bo Diddley. We're doing Bo Diddley, right? We did.
What's the next rock show going to be out there?
So the next one, we just did the Iron Maiden. If you really want to hear 3 guys geek out about Iron Maiden, listen to that.
We went crazy.
And then
check that out.
Yeah, the next one is interesting one. We got Love It, It's Live. 5 of the best live albums that rules.
Right. 5 great live albums. That was a good show that we recorded there. You guys will hear that on Sunday. And then we're going to go into Black History Month with Son House, Robert Johnson, Alan Wolf, and Bo Diddley at the end of February. So that's a good month. But rock shows are all booked up through the end of April. But we should get Phil in May or June, and we got so many people to cover. It's going to be a good year.
Yeah, we definitely could get him May or June. We could probably sleep it. You know what we should do May or June? Do some of the best producers, maybe for a whole month of people that produce and made a change in the music industry.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. So where can we find you, Rob?
We could do 1 or 2.
Where can we find
you can
Rob?
find me anywhere you can find me anywhere that's getting lumped up in Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and people, I gotta thank you. The YouTube channel has 734 subscribers right now. Our videos are doing very good, and thank you for supporting us. We're almost to our goal of 1,000 freaking viewers, and we'll be going on YouTube Live instead of Facebook, because YouTube we can actually get a lot more viewers, a lot more people, and they'll be out there. And then we can see how many people are watching the show. So that's a huge step for us. We're about 260 people away from YouTube Live. So if you guys are out there, hit the subscribe button, YouTube Live. You can get the YouTube Live got every single show we do. I put shows a few weeks later, a little later, so the podcast can get some numbers. But we've done so many interviews, like the RockerMike and Rob Percent, the Freak Show, the Conspiracy 420. You know what's funny? Our Conspiracy Show is the only show that hasn't been taken down from YouTube.
I've been thinking about that with all the censorship going on and the topics we've covered. We dodged a bullet so far. I don't know. If you want to find me, I'm on Instagram. on the RockerMike 212. Also Facebook under Michael Baker. Also the Rockshow podcast group page on Facebook. Check that out. I was on Parler. Parler was taken down. I'm on MeWe under RockerMike, and I just started a Clout Hub account. Posting on that under RockerMike as well. I kind of like Clout Hub. I don't have many followers yet, so if anybody has a Clout Hub account, look me up and friend me. But I kind of like it. Have you checked? You're not on it yet, right? Clout Hub.
No, I haven't. You know what? I between Twitter, YouTube, and I got so much on Instagram. I put a lot of stuff up that like you do, like in Facebook. But what I was going to tell you, you know what? The conspiracy show never really got taken down because we really don't talk conspiracy. We either defunct conspiracy or it's two guys having a conversation about what the fuck. We're not shitting them, right? It's just our grievance.
Right. It's not like other shows, other conspiracy shows. So, well, let's hope everybody stays up. Everybody should have a voice. That's the way I see it.
Yeah. Yep. So, Mike, thank you for putting this show together. This is a special show. I'll probably have it up by hopefully either Wednesday or Thursday, but this is a special episode of the Rock Show that we put in the last minute. Hopefully people will enjoy it. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Follow us on the RockerMike and Rob, the Rock Show, RockerMike presents or what? Yeah, the
Rockshow podcast group page.
Yeah, follow us. I'm tough. I was working all day.
You were working all day. It's all right.
All right, Mike. Thank you for a great show, and I'll see you Sunday, and I'll send you some email and send me something about that Cloud Hub so I can look at it.
Okay. All right, and don't forget, everybody. Don't get drunk.
Don't get drunk.
Get lumped
up.
All right. Take care, people.
See you next week.
The only podcast you will hear that will be music to your ears. You'll learn about bands you love or may not know, and it's only here on the Rock Show. Ooh, yeah, on the Rock Show. Ooh, yeah, on the Rock Show. So tell your friends and everyone you know. Let's get lumped up on the Rock Show.